This is Legacy Battle. Make sure you hit like and subscribe, whatever you're watching on. I am Michael Adams, creator of Legacy Battle. My panelists and co-hosts tonight from the Gridiron Battle Zone, Brian King from Steelers Nation South, Rollo Coughlin. Our special guest tonight, we're joined by an Australian professional golfer. He's played on the Japanese, the European, and the Australian tours, as well as the Nationwide and, of course, the PGA Tour. He's got 7 career wins. He's played in all the majors. In '94, he played in the President's Cup. And check out his website, bradleyhughesgolf.com. You can get instructions, lessons. There's even a blog on there. I just started looking through it. So it's a pretty cool website. So we got professional golfer Bradley Hughes here. Bradley, thank you so much for coming on.
You are welcome. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. So tonight's going to be, it's been a long time since we've done one of these versus shows. It's going to be Tiger Woods versus Phil Mickelson. We're keeping it to what's happened on the course. We're not going with all the crazy stuff that's happened to both of them off the course. And each of us will be representing a different aspect of the game, and then we'll go to Bradley to get his thoughts and opinions on it. So we'll start out with Brian.
All right, so I've got the head-to-head battle between these two. If you look at the head-to-head majors, Tiger was 15 major championship wins. Phil was 6 major championship wins. So you got a huge edge for Tiger there. Head-to-head non-majors, you get Tiger with 82 PGA Tour wins. You get Phil with 45 PGA Tour wins. So another huge edge for Tiger. As of 2022, Phil and Tiger were in the same group 38 times. There might have been another 1 or 2 cents, but 19 times Tiger shot the lower score. 15 times Phil shot the lower score, and 4 times they tied. So there's a very slight edge for Tiger, but it's very close. At the U.S. Open, when group, Tiger had a 3-2 advantage. At the PGA Championship, when group, Tiger was up 2-1, and then there was 2 ties. At the Players Championship, Tiger leads 2-0. Pebble Beach, and at the Masters, it's supposed to split 1-1. At the 2001 Masters, Tiger, he entered the final round at -12, while Phil was at -11. Tiger ultimately finished 3 strokes better than Phil in that one. There was another good Tiger-Phil showdown in the 2005 Ford Championship at Doral. Tiger beat Phil by 3 strokes in that one as well. And in 2006, Phil actually bested Tiger at Augusta by 3 strokes to win the Masters. And that was that awkward deal where Tiger had to hand Phil the green jacket. So I'm sure he wasn't thrilled about that. And then again in 2007 at the Deutsche Bank Championship, Phil came up on top by 2 strokes. So that said, this category is thoroughly dominated by Tiger. I mean, Phil really only seemed to close the gap, when Tiger was dealing with injuries or distracted about the extramarital scandal and that sort of thing. But when Tiger was healthy and focused, he beat Phil more often than not.
I think he beat everyone more often than not.
That's very true.
When he put that red on Sunday, you kind of knew it was over. But what to you, what made this rivalry so great? And do you think that they honestly didn't like each other back in the day? Because it seems like now they get along. They did the charity golf thing and all that stuff.
Yeah, there were rumors of that. I'm sure that they didn't get along. And that's more the competitor in each person. They want to be the big dog. Phil's never shied from the battle of how good he wanted to be. Obviously, he played in an era that Tiger Woods was in, and it made it more difficult. You could also kind of say the same for Ernie Els or David Duval. How many more tournaments would any of those guys have won if Tiger wasn't on the scene at that time? So I think 45 wins for Phil is a huge number. It's 8th all-time in career wins. He's won a lot of money. They haven't really battled it out head-to-head too much in the final round of big tournaments. The Doral one, I remember, I think Tiger shot 66 and Phil shot 69. They were final group together. Besides that, they haven't played a lot near the final group with one another, head-to-head. But you would probably say overall Tiger was the more dominant player, especially on the big occasion. He seemed to come through with those big shots and take the big titles. Phil every now and then would find some magic and get up there, but for the most part, I think Tiger was definitely a more intimidating player. He seemed to have all the goods that you knew if you had to be on your game. If he was there, he was going to not really give it up, and that's shown by his 82 wins. I think he's had the lead in 3/4 of those going into the last round nearly, and won all but one or two of them. So when he got a sniff, he was very hard to dismantle from the top of the leaderboard.
And let me ask you, since you're a golf instructor, because this is even something that I've kind of always wondered. Phil's nickname is Lefty, for those who don't know, but is the game any different playing left-handed? Because I know, like in baseball, it's a little different. Same with hockey. How does that translate to golf if you're swinging left-handed?
Well, absolutely, because obviously a draw goes the opposite. A draw for lefty becomes a fade for a right-handed player. So we know every golf course is different. It's not like tennis or anything like that where it's the same court dimensions. So every day is slightly different based on tee positions and wind. And obviously we've got holes that dogleg around. Sometimes a fade stops quicker on a green. You can get the ball closer, and sometimes a draw around the corner might run further. So there's certain advantages. Augusta was always considered a drawer's golf course because a lot of the holes went right to left. So a right-handed golfer would draw it around the corners on some of those holes and get a little distance advantage over the ones that couldn't. And then in latter years, which is surprising to me, we had Bubba Watson do well there. I think he won it twice. Mickelson's won it 3 times. Mike Weir won it. All these left-handers started winning at Augusta. And it sort of debunked the theory that you had to draw it off the tee, because all those guys actually had to fade it off the tee to get it around the corners. So it is a slightly different game. I don't know if one is better than the other. Obviously, wind conditions play a role on that, whether you're going to cut the ball against the wind or can hook it on the wind, little things like that. But I think the biggest thing just for left-handers is over the last 25 years or so, it's just there's better equipment for them. In the past, the left-handed golfer was kind of the forgotten man. Everything was made golf-wise for the right-handed player, and the lefties sort of got the junk that came out the chute at the end, that they didn't really have a specific club. So they've sort of caught up in the technology things, because there are a lot of left-handed golfers. There just weren't a lot in the pro ranks, but now it's no advantage, I don't think, to be one or the other. I know if I was playing again, I could never learn to play left-handed. I'd always be a righty. So I don't know. It's just I don't think there's one way or the other for that. But I think Tiger, and you can see it in his eyes, Phil's always chumming the crowd up and thumbs up and smiling, and Tiger's just, there was a story. He walked to the first tee at Augusta one year. His mum said hello to him, and he didn't even recognize her or know her. He was so focused on what he was doing. Wow. He just marched to the tee, and it was game on.
Wow. Not recognize your mother. Oh my goodness. My mother would smack me right in the face to get my attention. So I'm going to build a little bit off of here of what Brian said and added a few other things here. So Brian was right on Tiger with the 82 wins. That was in 373 events. He also has 12 international wins and has made 338 cuts out of 373. Now, back in the day, he was making every cut, but the last 10 years, he has not done so well on making those cuts. Now, he's been a runner-up 32 times and placed third 19 times on top of those 82 victories. And he's got 199 top 10 finishes and then the 15 majors, of course. And then we shoot over to Phil. Phil almost has doubled him in events, 659 events. That's a lot of golf events. That shows how well his career has gone. He's got the 45 wins, but he's got the 4 international wins to add to it. Now, Phil has made 534 cuts. That's pretty impressive considering how much he's played. He's been a runner-up 38 times. He's finished third 28 times. and 198 top 10 finishes. And then he's got the 6 majors, to add to that. So to throw a little more information here, driving distance, Tiger's average drive is 297 yards for the career. Now, it used to be a lot higher than that. And those injuries that, Brian kind of brought up there a little bit, they plagued him and brought that drive down. He can't use his left knee as well as he used to, which really affects the drive. So 297 yards. Phil's averaging 302.5. That's pretty impressive anytime you can get over 300. Just some records. So Tiger Woods' largest victory at a major was 15 shots at the U.S. Open, whereas Phil Mickelson's combined major wins is only by 10 shots. So that should tell you a little bit how dominant Tiger was, especially back in the day. Tiger's an 11-time player of the year. Phil's got 0. Tiger's been ranked number 1. Phil has not. But as Bradley mentioned, when you played in Tiger's era, unfortunately, Tiger was always number 1 there. So here's what I will say for Phil, though, because I feel like we need to make some equal arguments here. To me, the Masters is the biggest tournament. It's the Super Bowl, the Wimbledon, the World Series, whatever you want to call it. To me, that's what the Masters is. Phil may be the greatest Masters player ever. He's got more top 5 and top 10 finishes. He's got the 3 wins there for that, elusive green jacket. So a lot of the things that we're discussing tonight, it's going to look like Tiger is the better golfer. But we're also only talking Tiger's dominance was only for a short time period. Phil has had the longevity, so we'll see where we go with that. So, Bradley, what do you think of their shots and stuff?
I think, obviously, I think Phil's gotten a little bit longer over time. That's been a goal of his. Tiger was always the longest, back in the day, and he's probably toned that down a little bit. 1, due to injury, and 2, the technology has helped advance a lot of the other players. They've caught up. They know how to get the right shaft and loft and launch and spin and everything that for him came quite easily back in the day. So I think one of the big things with Phil is the length of his swing. It's obviously important as you get older that you're going to not be as flexible and you're not going to swing as far and not going to create as much speed. But he's made that a mission that he's still going to have the speed in there, and that helps him compete against the younger guys. Overall, I think if you looked at their individual, I don't know if this is a question, but I'm going to touch on it now. I would say overall, Tiger has probably been the better driver of the ball. At one point, they were number 1 and 2 in the world, and you touched on that. Phil was actually, like you said, never got to number 1, but he was number 2 for like 5 years. For not concurrent, but 5 years total. That's a long time, and it's kind of amazing that someone like a Luke Donald or a Martin Keimer or what have you were number 1, and Phil never was, because he was obviously the much higher praised player than some of those guys were that actually made that number 1 mark. But to get to number 2 and be there, he was always in there 750 weeks in the top 10 or something like that. So he's had the longevity. He's probably regarded as a more mercurial player, Phil, because of some of these short game shots. He flips them over his head and does all these crazy things that, more short game orientated that freak people out. But then on the other hand, you've got Tiger with his chip in at Augusta and, all these different shots that he's played close to the green that he probably doesn't get as much skill recognition for that Phil does, but he hit him at the right moment. So it's, there's all these different things. Long irons, I'm sure Tiger was definitely a better longer iron player. He could hit it higher and softer and land it on the green to impossible flags. You'd probably give Phil the edge in the mid irons and maybe the wedge play. But putting wise, Tiger, there's not many putts that he missed that he had to make. Whereas Phil, he could go on a rampage of missing or making. So, and that's the consistency of golf. It's a tough game to stay consistent at. But like I said, Tiger is probably a once-in-a-lifetime golfer. We'd probably never see anything like that again. We all huffed and puffed when Nike gave him $40 million to turn pro, and everyone said he's going to be the next this and next that, and kind of no one believed it. But he obviously proved everyone wrong.
You're right. I mean, that hype train was rolling right out of the gate, but I mean, he lived up to it absolutely. So
I think
Rollo,
they do have a kind of a storyline together. You know, obviously Phil won US Amateur. Phil was four-time All-American first team. I don't think Tiger ever did that, or maybe he didn't go for 4 years. But you know, overall, you would probably say Mickelson had a slight edge in the amateur career, even though Tiger won the 3 US Amateurs. You know, Phil won a PGA Tour event, and the best as an amateur, and Tiger, I think the best he got was like a 22nd. And I think that's where all the hype came from. Everyone went, well, Mickelson's won, he's going to come out and do great. Tiger's overhyped, he's only come 22nd, and we're giving him $40 million. But, you know, obviously, like I said, that all got proved wrong pretty quickly.
All right, Rollo, go ahead and finish us out. You'll be taking care of their greatest moments.
So both of these guys have had some moments on the course that will stand out in lore. But both of them have dealt with some things off the course that they had to deal with while they were playing on the course. Like when Phil in 2010, his wife was dealing with breast cancer and she couldn't walk the course with him, and he wound up winning the 2010 Masters. And then, with that memorable shot of him crying with her in the clubhouse. In 2006 at the British Open, Tiger, he didn't compete in the Masters or US Open, but the year that his father passed away, he wound up winning the 2006 British Open by 2 strokes. Phil also, in addition to that 2010 Masters win, he also won in 2006 and 2004. 2004, which was, of course, his first major win. 2000, 2009, Phil actually beat Tiger at the Tour Championships. He actually beat him pretty handily in both of those events. In 2001, Tiger took the Tiger Slam, which was, a term because he won the U.S. Open, British Open, PGA Championship, and the 2001 Masters, which was coined the Tiger Slam. Tiger also won his 1997 Masters by 12 shots. He also won the 2000 U.S. Open, which was the largest margin of victory. He finished 12 under par, when Ernie Els and Miguel Angel Jimenez were +3. Look at that margin of victory in the 2000 U.S. Open. Tiger Woods, of course, won 15 majors, and Phil won 6 majors. But you see, they both had to deal with some things that they were dealing with personally, and they both wound up coming out on top in major tournament wins. So that's a small comparison of the two on the course.
Phil,
yeah, and I think.
Go ahead.
I think everyone has their off-course moments too. I mean, we're all human. We're not just, they're all not gods. Their whole life goes unscathed. Some, I guess you could call some of Tiger's he brought on himself. But, everyone deals with that. It just doesn't make the news because we're not all Tiger Woods.
So what's to you, what do you remember? I mean, obviously they're both still active, but what do you remember, mostly about each one of them?
Well, I was fortunate to play with them. So I played with Phil a lot more. I only ever got to play with Tiger once, and that was pretty fun, though. It was actually the final round of the Deutsche Bank 2005. And so I got to see him in Sunday red and black. But the funny thing was, normally if you play with Tiger Woods in the final round on the tournament, you're going to be in the lead, but we weren't. We were coming 25th or something like that. So he was a bit more engaging that day. We got along pretty well, had a fun day. His caddy, Steve, I grew up with. I used to caddy for Steve in Australia. He was the assistant pro at my golf club, so we had that sort of to help get things underway. I always laughed or joked that I made him nervous because he double bogeyed the first hole, that I must have put him off somehow, but I didn't think that. It was not quite my star power that did that to him. But I play with Phil a lot more times, and he, I like Phil. I think what he does, or what he has done for the game, is very substantial. He's always interacted with the crowd. He's always done things to, in a slightly different way. Tiger obviously interacted with the crowd, but more in passionate moments when things went really well and he was full of emotion. But Phil sort of engaged with everyone right throughout the round. So, I played against Phil in a match in that President's Cup that you mentioned, and I was using a wood. You remember those things that they actually were made of wood? I was 1994. I was still using a wooden driver, and I actually outdrove him several times. So, and I always laugh now because I wouldn't get within 50 yards of him now, the way he hits it with the new equipment and my lack of practice and play. So just observing, they're two very different individuals, but they've still got the same, they've always had the same goal. Both prodigies. Mickelson had the chipping green in his backyard and probably learned all those crazy shots that he does. Tiger was, Bob Hope show at 2 and things like that. So they've always been in the spotlight together at certainly just slightly different periods. I know they're not too far apart in age, maybe 5 years apart or so in age. So it's been an intriguing watch. I think out of all the players, they're definitely the most high profile out of the last 25 years. And the fact that they competed against one another sort of brought an extra element to it when they were both in contention. And, like you said, they're head-to-head when they play in the same group is not too far off. 1915 and 4, I think it was, in Tiger's favour. But obviously the edge goes to Tiger. Overall, majors mean the most to, players of that ability that have won so many times. But, Phil could have won 70 tournaments if Tiger wasn't around. So it's hard to say, but obviously overall, all the balance weighs in Tiger's favour, just about every category and feature.
So let's move into our vote. Brian, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I like Bradley summed it up. It's hard to go against Tiger. I feel like, when he was focused and when he was not distracted, there's just nobody better. You could get him on an off day, but when he was focused, it was pretty much, he was the man. So I got to go with Tiger on this one.
Okay. I'm going to go next. And Brian, I'm not going to disagree with what you just said, because for that 10-year period, Tiger took golf to new levels. But I don't know. I'm going to be the oddball out tonight here. I guarantee it. But the reason why I'm actually going to vote for Phil is golf. If I want to equate it to something else, it's not a sprint. It's a marathon, because your career can be so long. And Mickelson's consistency for 20, oh my goodness, almost 30 years now has just been fantastic. We still see him doing really, really well. He just finished second place at the Masters. I mean, that's incredible, especially at his age, that he's still doing that. We haven't seen Tiger do anything like that in years. It's been a long, long time. 2018, I think, was his last one. And before that, it was back even further. So I like the longevity. It just reminds me more of Jack than how Tiger kind of just did it in a small time period. So I'm taking Phil because of the longevity. Rollo?
I gotta go Tiger. Tiger made golf cool, with the whole Nike deal. And when you think of golf, like if you, the casual observer, and you were to talk about golf, and you think that, or you ask who's a golfer that Tiger Woods going to be probably the first person they name. So I got to go Tiger.
Okay. Golf was already cool for us Pittsburghers with Arnold Palmer, but anyway, go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, I agree. Everyone knows who Tiger Woods is, 100% all around the world. You could go anywhere and hold up a picture or just mention his name, and everyone really knows who he is. I think he did a good job of traveling around the world. I'm sure he was paid handsomely to do it, but he would come to Australia and he would play in Thailand, and he would play a bunch of tournaments in Germany. He sort of spread his name and his brand all around. Phil maybe not quite as much, but I think it was more of an obligation for Tiger because he was number one and a big thing, and everyone wanted to get a piece of him. So, I can't put Phil ahead of him for record, but for longevity, yes, I agree, Matt. I think Phil's done a really good job. Tiger was injured for a long time, so we don't even know what could have happened in those years in between. But playing through injuries, no fun. Phil's escaped that for the most part, and Tiger, we can see now, is kind of a former shell of himself. He has, he can't move hardly, and his body is just broken down. Whereas Phil won the PGA, 18 months ago, and just came second in the Masters. So, yeah, it's a great battle. Numbers say Tiger, but numbers in any other era without Tiger, you'd probably pick Phil.
So a win for Tiger Woods tonight. Let's move into our Q&A. We'll go Brian, Rollo, me.
All right, Bradley. A couple of decades ago, we saw an upswing in Aussie golfers making an impact on the PGA Tour. So much so that other than the United States, Australia has more PGA Tour players per capita than any other country in the world. Being an Aussie yourself, how would you explain the large increase in Aussie interest and success in the game of golf itself?
I think one of the big things is in Australia we have very good weather, so we don't get these crazy winters with snow and anything like that. It's a year-round game, and the Australian tour that we got to play on, our schedule of events were very limited. They sort of, when I played, they were from middle of November or early November through to middle of February, and then that was done. So if you wanted to craft your profession from basically March to November, you couldn't do it at home. You had to travel. You had to go somewhere. So a lot of us just, we would pack up shop, and initially everyone went to Europe. All the Aussie guys went over to Europe because I guess it wasn't as far-fetched as playing in America. You watch all the US tour events on TV growing up and you go, holy cow, that's a lot of atmosphere, and look at all those good players there. Let's just sneak off to Europe and sort of work our way over. And a lot of guys did that. We all kind of started in Europe. And then we got to the point where we had players, obviously Greg Norman, but Steve Elkington started winning in America, and then Brett Ogle came over and he won, and kind of guys that we knew and played. I grew up with Brett Ogle. Elk was a few years older, but when you see guys that you knew and played with, Craig Parry, and win and do it and achieve, then it made it easier for the Aussies to then just say, you know what, I'm going to skip the other stuff. I'm just going to go straight to America. And I think we all had the games for it. It was just the scenario of, this place looks too much and too big all at once. But once a couple of your friends did it, it was easier to jump the ship and head straight there and bypass the other stuff.
Go ahead, Rollo.
Bradley, we just debated about two of the greatest golfers of the last 25 years. Who in today's game do you think in the next 25 years could have that Tiger Phil debate in 25 years?
Ooh, that's a tough question. Obviously, there's been a lot of guys with potential that haven't been able to go on with it. You look at Duval, someone like that, whether he got injured or lost his will or lost his game. It takes a special person to be so single-minded on everything, because you do have other stuff. You've got your house and your family, but some of these guys are just so single-willed to do it. I think it depends on the person, but as far as golf games, I do like Victor Hovland's game. He hasn't won enough yet to probably say he can be a dominating force, but I think he's got all the tools. He can out-hit everyone, basically. It's just whether his putter and short game shows up. But, he's really good. This Cameron Young guy looks pretty good. He hits it long and sort of has a great results in a pretty early period of time in his career. So there are a couple of guys I would look to. Cameron Smith, obviously, is an Aussie, won the Open performed well in all these tournaments, but now he's not going to get to play as many PGA events except probably majors, but he could still be a force in that. But if majors count, then he can still be a force. But overall, people will probably not remember him as much because we do still base a lot on the PGA Tour wins, and he's just not going to get that chance. But I think there you guys. I'm sure there's other kids coming up that are 18 and 19 now that are 6'4" and swing at 125 miles an hour and can put the eyes out of it. And there'll be someone turn up in the next few years, that, probably not to Tiger's league, but someone that will, kind of represent what he did and what he was. But unfortunately for him, there's now a lot of guys that are going to do that. So I think it's going to be a battle. It's going to be really hard for people to break out and have any type of Phil or Tiger career ever again.
Yeah, you look at one of the people now that's maybe been the most successful last 5 years, like with Dustin Johnson, and he doesn't even really come close to what those two were able to do early on. But anyways, so you retired in 2008, became a golf coach. Was there any thought to playing on the senior tour when you became eligible?
It was always in the back of my mind because I stopped playing when I was like 41. I had enough of the travel, and I was on the Nationwide at the time. It was hard to get back on tour with all the young kids, and I had a family and a mortgage, and I was playing fine. I just got sick of it. I just wasn't making enough money for the effort that I put in. So I just thought, I want to stay home more. I'd been traveling for over 22 years playing golf. So I did that, and I thought, well, what else can I do? I must know something about golf, so let's teach. And at the start, I wasn't a good teacher. I was, because I taught stuff that I got told, and I decided at that point I've got to make up my own logics and ideas based on a couple of reasons. One, how I could hit the ball well. I was a good hitter of the ball. So I need to sort of think about what I did and then try and include that or base that around a lot of the other great players that we know and talk about and revere. So I came up with a whole new direction of my teaching, and it's done really well ever since. Obviously, you need a bit of luck in teaching. You need preferably a good player to play well and get your brand out there, which happened with Brendan Todd, who was kind of ready to retire from golf because he'd had 3 lean years, and we got together and worked it out. And within 18 months, he had his card back and he'd won 2 tournaments in a row. So that was a big success story for me and for people to learn my name a little bit with my teaching. But it's been going really well. I've taught a bunch of others. In fact, one of my players just won the Champions Tour event yesterday, Mark Hensby. So we're still on a little bit of a roll. I've worked with Hens for about 5 years, and we just, continually do a lot of the same stuff because we know it works. It's just making it become a habit. I call it putting things into your swing DNA that you basically end up doing without having to think too much. And that was a great result. I enjoyed watching it.
One more each, guys.
Sort of on the same vein, Bradley, and the instructional thing. I took a look at the BradleyHughesGolf.com, and it's an impressive site. Access to plenty of information to help the average golfer improve his or her game. I was particularly intrigued by the down under board. Can you explain to our audience what that is exactly and how it can be used to help a golfer get better?
Sure. So when I started teaching, I thought we all hear about using the ground better. That's kind of one of the fundamentals that people talk about. You got to use the ground. But I don't think anyone was explaining it well enough or giving the person the input on how to do it correctly. Typically, when you use the ground, people would push down and then they jump up. So in golf, if you jump up, you're getting further from the ball. So you have to now throw the club at the ball or straighten the right arm more, all these different things. And they in process stop your body from turning. You sort of jump up and flick it with your hands rather than push down and rotate. So I used it in my teaching early on. It was just a piece of wood initially. I didn't want anyone to spend a lot of money on getting training aids to help them out. But I had a guy come and show me a prototype that he had of it. And he said, look, this is this works. He said, I wanted to find out more about it. I know it works because I've tried it. I wanted to learn more about it. And he's a prototype. And well, would you want to try and do this? I said, absolutely. It's kind of like, why do we buy water in a bottle when we've got water in a tap? That was kind of how he said it. It's just, it seems weird that, people, you could go buy a bit of wood, but why not just buy this? Because it's pre-made. It's got got videos where there's all these different things. So the basic premise of it was to make people not jump from the ball, have better balance and stability, and then be able to rotate through the ball and beyond without just stopping their body. And that's kind of the pitfall of the poor player. They start throwing their hands and arms and shoulders at the ball, and they just don't use their legs very well. So that was where it came about. Obviously, Brendan used it. He uses it every day still, Brendan Todd, and it gained some traction with his success, and it's done really well. It's, everyone that I ever use it with can't believe how much it helps. So it's certainly beneficial. It's one of the few gimmicky swing aids in that it does everything: set up to backswing, to take away, to downswing, to impact and through. So it's not just a one little area to fix. It does the whole swing.
Nice.
And I called it Down Under because I'm from down under, and it's down under your feet. So that was a no-brainer for the name of it. But it's
Right.
it's been great.
Bradley, you played golf for a number of years. Tell us about your most memorable moment in golf, something that you will tell your great-grandkids or your grandkids about your most memorable moment on the golf course.
Obviously, winning is very fun. The first time I won the Australian Masters, I beat a field that had Greg Norman and Nick Price in it, so that was pretty cool. I shot 7 under the last day and jumped everyone and ended up winning the playoff. I won it in 5 years later in '98, and I broke Greg Norman's record by about 5 shots, and that had a great field too. So that was fun. That was my hometown tournament. But probably the most memorable thing would be playing in the President's Cup, the first one. I was a last-minute inclusion. I wasn't originally in the team, but Greg Norman had to pull out, and they asked me to come and take his spot, which was pretty big shoes to fill, but I tried my best. And I was in Japan. I flew over from Tokyo in a daze, got there, and basically 2 days later, I'm playing the first match with Nick Price, who was #1 in the world, and against Fred Couples and Davis Love. So that was probably the highlight match, and I was in it. I remember being on the first tee. Byron Nelson was there flipping the coin to see who hit off first. And there was like 3 presidents on the tee. And we had a 2-hour fog delay, and I was nervous as heck. And I teed my ball up, and I put the club down, and everything went black. I couldn't see anything. Couldn't see the club, couldn't see the ball. And I decided I shouldn't waggle the club because I don't know where the ball is. So I just kept the club on the ground and swung away. And I hit it up the fairway and birdied the first hole. I hit an 8-iron to a foot, and it was a great match. I think it's still one of the best scoring matches. I birdied 3 of the first 8 holes, and we were 5 down. They birdied every hole. And then myself and Nick Price made a comeback, and by the time we finished the 15th hole, we were all squares. And I think every hole was won with a birdie or an eagle in those first 15 holes. So that was a cool thing to be part of. Presidents, Byron Nelson, Nick Price, Freddie and Davis, and the first President's Cup.
So we'll get you out of here with this. You've coached several PGA players, and I'm sure that you've had amateurs and just like golfers for fun out there that you've worked with. What would you say is the biggest weakness for people? Is it normally the physical game or the mental game?
Or they go hand in hand. Definitely the physical game. If you have some idea that you can hit the ball half solid and somewhere straight, then it helps your mental game. You don't worry about, am I going to hit this left, right, top it, or sky it? That helps you have a better mental game. But just as a tip, I think the biggest thing that we see with the beginner or the amateur golfer is, or the poorer golfer, put it that way, is they know they want to hit the back of the ball, but they start hitting the back of the ball from the top of the swing. And it's very hard for them to envision that the club actually comes on an arc. It's not a straight line. So we try and hit the back of the ball. I call it, if the golf ball looked like a clock, the top of the ball would be 12 o'clock, below the ball where my feet are would be 6, and the back of the ball would be 3. It's kind of the look of a clock shape, the times. So we want to hit the ball at 3 o'clock, but if you start swinging at 3 o'clock from the way down, or even too early in the swing, you actually start hitting the ball at 1:30, because you come across the ball because your body moves, your arms rotate, your body rotates, and you pardon me, and your hips go forward. So it takes a lot of visual training and feels to see that you actually have to feel like you're going to hit the inside of the ball to actually hit the back of it. So that's kind of one of the big things that I teach first. If we can understand the visual of what is actually happening, then it becomes much easier to hit the ball solid and straight, and then you can you can adjust your mental game according to that, because you have a much greater chance of hitting the ball where you want.
Excellent. Thank you, Bradley, for joining us this morning. We appreciate you coming on.
You got it, mate. Thanks for having me.
I'll remind everybody, check out his website. That's bradleyhughesgolf.com. As Brian and I were both saying, there's a lot of really cool stuff on there, so be sure to check that out. I'll remind everybody also to hit like and subscribe, whatever you're listening on. We'll see you all next time. Have a wonderful day.